Well, I'll introduce our staff at the time.
Okay. Okay.
All good?
Oh, good, okay. We'll call the meeting to order. And do we have any observers who wish to make comment? No?
No, we did not.
No, okay. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes of the regular and the closed meetings of February 9th, 2022? Start with the regular meeting.
Motion to approve those minutes of the regular meeting.
Okay, second?
Second.
You have a second? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, no, they'll be approved. 7-0. How about the, can I have a motion to approve the closed, the minutes for the closed meetings of February 9th? Okay, a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, that passes 7-0. Next, we go to the director's report.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. Before I begin, Noreen, I just want to mention that cable might not be plugged in.
It's not,
So
it's not. So,
is it dead? Your iPad battery or?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, let me just, sorry, technical difficulty here.
It's okay, I have enough juice to get this thing.
Are you sure?
well, it's easy to plug in.
My bike over here. I'm just trying to be polite. All right. I do it all,
Thank you.
okay, so.
Thank you very much.
Hopefully it'll work now.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, director's report.
All right. Okay, so good evening, everyone. As you all know from my communication to you already, February 28th on Monday, we lifted the mask mandate. Well, the governor lifted the mask mandate, the Skokie Village lifted the local mandate, and then we lifted our library rule. Now we're in coordination in concert with the state, local officials, and CDC. Things have been going well. I acknowledge we haven't really had any issues or complaints. Difficulty with that change. Some people choose to wear their masks and some people don't, and it's I have a note in here about the strategic planning process. So if you recall back, I think in the fall, I had updated the board saying that I was preparing to kind of work with some people to create a timeline. Unfortunately, due to just kind of higher priorities at the time in January and February, I've been able to get that kick-started, but we do have a timeline. I have confirmed the, including Shabnam and Noreen, so graciously agreed to participate. Well, we have monthly meetings set already in our calendars, so we're ready to get kicked off here in April, and I hope that we'll have a planning process that will yield a new strategic plan by September for board approval. I know that's typically, we typically bring it to the board around June of the year where it's written, but so it will be a few months late. I apologize for that, but it is what it is, and it's just like I needed to prioritize some other things like the COVID response, labor relations stuff, and that kind of thing. So hopefully that's okay. I don't know if there are any comments or questions about that. Okay.
Good prioritization.
As I noted here, we have been working with Andrew Berman, Charles McNutt on discussing the cost estimates for the libraries, you know, the planned renovation of the third floor. It's not at a point where I'm ready to share it with the board because being Andrew Berman to refine some of his ideas and get a reviewed cost estimate. We have that, I'll be able to present it to the board, explain what has changed in the master plan from last month, what we saw last month. I'll also present kind of some numbers in a way that you can see how things break up into different like major chunks, like flooring and lighting, ceiling and furniture, and then the restrooms. So at that point, the board will have the information it needs to decide whether or not or all of the proposed. I'll be prepared at that point to make a recommendation. Wanting to get it to a better place and refine. I think that's pretty much it. The other updates here I have are more community related. It's nice, I went to it's not in here, but I went to the High Point 8000 North ribbon cutting Tuesday morning, and it was just nice to see like a lot of people that, you know, I haven't seen in months or, you know, in some cases longer than that. And we had Laura was there, Nancy Kim Phillips was there. It's actually really beautiful. Kind of exceeded my expectations, and I had high expectations. So, but most importantly, as I've told everyone that will listen to me, the most it will house, you know, a new Skokie Public Library patrons. You know, so I have the card of releasing the senior lease staff to make sure that we have information provided to the new start coming in. Right now, there aren't that many people living there. They haven't started. It'll become library card holders.
Anything about when the restaurant's supposed to be there?
I have heard a little bit about that when I go to the chamber board meetings. I believe the original Japanese restaurant that was, I guess, I'm not sure what happened, but I guess that didn't work out. So I think it sounded like they were close on closing with another.
Questions or comments on the director's report?
Have a chance to participate in any of the coming together activities, please check that out. Happening online, but also
I just wanted to say I thought that the newsletter, the library's newsletter is fantastic on the coming together topic. And if you haven't had a chance to look at it yet, make sure you do so, because there's a list there of our many resources relating to the main. And I just thought the staff did an outstanding job on that.
thank you. I'll pass that on.
Yeah.
They did a great job, and I was really proud of.
It's all thank you time.
Okay.
Because the directory, Susie, and you, the director, the photography directory, whatever we're gonna call it ultimately is, and has already worked, because you mentioned 2 staff members in your, you know, the longer part. I'm like, oh, who is that? Let me just go.
Yeah.
And now I can put those faces, those names to faces, and it was, I really think it's a wonderful addition.
Well, that's all credit to Susie. She did a great job creating that photo directory for the board. So your iPads, so let me know. Well, I'm sure she'll update it every once in a while, but I was really happy when I saw it too.
Well, Okay, next is the approval of the roofing project pay application in the amount of $163,687.03. That's at page 5. Any questions or comments on that? Hearing none, can I have a motion to approve that pay application?
So move.
Second?
Second.
Okay, we have, because it's money, we gotta go individually. Mary,
Yes.
Michelle,
Yes.
Jean?
Yes.
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 Okay, and Shabnam?
Yes.
Okay, that passes 7-0. Next is the approval of the bills, the February 22nd disbursement report, which begins on page 14. Have any questions or comments on the bill disbursement report?
I have just a sort of general question, and I know that the places that we see Fifth Third throughout this report are, you know, just purchases that were made. Is through the credit card,
yes,
right?
yes.
So why is it just that, okay, we're just paying our bill, our credit card bill with these when they all add up?
What that is so anytime we have a charge with Fifth Third, it will show up in the disbursements, but as Fifth Third Bank, but then in the next sheet after the disbursements are included in the attachment of the disbursements is the,
Right, each
that gives
transaction.
you the actual vendor that's tied to
Right,
the charge,
right.
so.
No, and I did see that. It was, we're obviously not paying any interest rate,
On,
our credit card.
we're paying off our bill,
Yeah,
balance
yeah.
every month, I can assure you.
Okay.
Give lights.
We don't mess around. Also, actually, honestly, because of our. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm not bad, that's a bonus.
Thank you.
Sure.
I
I would
wanted
just
to
add,
clear that up.
the listing of the credit card items was at the board's request. Originally, they would send us the spending list, and it would just say credit card, and we approved 13,000 for the credit card. And so we said, how can we justify? So then they broke it, at our request, they broke it down and added that the 2 pages that you see on 18 and 19, or 17 and 18 to break it down, rather than just they listed as credit cards.
Yeah, those are good.
That's great. I think it's great to have it.
Okay, any other questions or comments on the bills?
I had a question on 6449, Skokie School District 69 for 1250. Talk a little bit about that.
Our partnership that we were doing with the early childhood. No, I don't remember.
Just 1 second.
You're right, though.
Sounds right.
We're wrapping up that
I think
grant.
you are right.
And
Because it's not
additional
their other
bucks.
grants, because we got a grant for their money.
We'll have to, let me get back to you on with a definitive answer on that.
detail.
It's not in one of those. boards.
Okay, but that was just to clarify a little bit more. So it was a grant that we got specifically for District 69.
Oh, in conjunction with the program with them, yes. And the reason why I wanted to put there is I don't want it shown as to be rolled into other expenses. By sitting here, I can always track. We got a $5,000 grant, and this is the amount of money that we spent from the grant.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Lloyd.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, can I have a motion to approve the disbursements?
Motion to approve.
Second? Second, okay, then we gotta go around. Mary,
Yes.
Michelle,
Yes.
Jean?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes,
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, that passes 7-0. Next is the consent agenda, which includes the financial statements. Do we have any questions or comments on that? That begins at 21.
Just a brief comment that actually Richard clarified for me, and I think it might be interesting for all the other trustees. If you look at page 23, the financial statement through February 2022, the line item underneath capital, the next line is 2019 bond debt repayment debt service. I asked Richard, why are there just the 2 payments? And he reminded me that's because of the amortization schedule. There's 1 payment for interest and 1 payment towards the principal. So
The payment in June is interest only. The payment in December is interest and principal.
okay, thank you.
But
But
it's
it's always
designed to be two
biannually.
twice a year,
Biannual
yeah, it's
payment.
not like spread out over. I'm here talking about the line item one.
Any other questions or comments on the consent agenda? Hearing none, can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda? Second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, that passes 7-0. Okay, next is approval of the revised resources selection policy that begins on 36.
At this time, I'll introduce our colleague, Annabelle Mortensen from our Access Services Department. Actually, our largest department in her organization. Prepared this revision with help from Laura and over to Annabelle. She can explain what's in the revision.
Thanks for having me. As I mentioned in the memo, the board looks at the policy every 2 years. Those of you who were here 2 years ago are forgiven if you've forgotten looking at the policy because it was March 2020. So this might be very fresh for you. So the National Association of American Library Association of the state, basically state law, all stipulate that there should be a resource selection policy. It guides the nuts and bolts of what the library selects, of what the library removes through reading. It affirms the library's mission and values, and also it affirms library commitment to intellectual freedom, which, given what's happened in other states in particular, and in our state, in some cases, school districts, et cetera, is very much a top of mind, I know, for many of you and for librarians. So with the revision this year, we've made a few changes, suggested changes to the draft. And those are detailed in the memo. One is adopting the American Library Association's diverse collections and interpretation of the Library Bill of Rights. In the past, the policy has always had the ALA Bill of Rights, which has been around for decades. The World War II era was when it was first adopted, and the freedom to read statement, the freedom to view statement. We felt that it was important to add diverse collections statement because it further reinforces and very clearly calls out what it means to adhere to the Bill of Rights through a diversity and equity lens. And because that is called out in a way in this statement that is, for lack of a better term, a little bit more modern than these other statements that have been around for decades and decades, we wanted to add that. Also, we added a section which affirms parental responsibility in guiding use of resources for their own children. As you know, at the library, we have a kids section, we have teen, and we have adult, and those are all designations for what we think the audience of certain materials might be. However, we do not prescribe who checks out items from any section. We want to affirm that it is the responsibility of parents and caregivers to look at what their own families, what their own children are viewing, but we aren't going to not check out an item to any patron because it is in a particular area or not in a particular area. And also just affirm that, you know, everyone is an individual and what might be something that certain folks feel are appropriate for their children, other folks may feel differently. We also wanted to add more information just on digital products, both products that relate to ebooks, e-resources, and databases. That was missing in the past. And it's really a big chunk of our budget, as you know, seen every year. But there are a few considerations for those products that are a little bit different than what we use for physical products. And then we slightly revised the request for reconsideration form. We broadened it, just the phrasing of whether a person has viewed or has read an entire piece, to just be broader of examined, because the form can be used for any of the format that the library carries in their various. And also to reflect the revised selection policy of the criteria that we use when we select materials. So with that, please let me know what questions you have.
Was there a change in the form?
Refreshed,
It
yeah.
refreshed.
Oh, okay. Can you just say a little
Yes.
bit about why
Yeah.
that was refreshed?
Sure, so the original packet that you received had actually the old reconsideration form. Your iPad right now has the revised form for your consideration. And so there was a change to 2 questions that have you read or examined to this title question. And then there was a removal of a question that it's a very old school library, I'll say. Are you aware of the judgment of this material by literary critics or area subject specialists? Please provide names of reviewers and citations for reviews if known. So we removed that question. In the old days of library service, basically the gold standard was that something needed to have a professional review in a professional library journal. And those times have changed. And as you see, what we use for our selection criteria can be quite broad. So because we don't have that explicitly as just be all end all of our criteria, we removed that statement, or that question rather.
Can you explain for us the process that goes on when a patron submits one of these requests for reconsideration? And I understand you're going through one now.
Yeah.
And if you could just tell us what the process is and who makes the final decision.
Of course. So I'll backtrack a little bit because this formal process is the formal process, but we frequently, and I mean, this has been true of all of it throughout my time here, we frequently get questions from patrons about the collection. Either questions regarding, oh, this seems like this might not be appropriate for teens, or I have a question about this book, it's very controversial, or there's something here, just through just common everyday questions. And that hasn't changed. It's been that way for years and years. When we get those questions from staff, we always direct our staff to, if the patron does have a concern, to frankly pass that along to me or to the collection development supervisor, who for a time was me as well, but is now Denise Hvac, so that we can reach out to the patron and have a conversation. Because we always want to have a conversation first. We always want to just lend a listening ear of what their concerns are and tell them a little bit more about our process, etc. So the time I've been doing this, that has happened every single time, except twice have we gone to the formal reconsideration process. So the formal reconsideration process is started when a patron fills out the reconsideration form. And in some cases, the form is provided to them by staff. In other cases, they find it online or they ask for it specifically, but they fill out the form. When that is filled out, then we notify the patron and let them know that we've received it. And in that case, it is Richard who notifies the patron, says, thank you, we received it. And then the director, and this is all detailed in the policy, the director creates an ad hoc committee of staff members to review the reconsideration request. The committee always includes the access services manager, which right now is me. It always includes the person who is the selector for the area of the material in question. In this particular case, the one we're going through now, that is also me. And then other staff members, based on a variety of criteria, usually related to the item that is being submitted for reconsideration. Director sends the committee a formal request, ad hoc committee, a formal request. And the committee then reviews the material. In my role as access services manager, I reach out to the committee and I provide them a copy of the reconsideration. I provide them with other data regarding the item. So for example, it could be circulation numbers of the item in question. It could be how long the item has been in the collection, how many other libraries locally may have the item, any relevant reviews that can be found. So nothing subjective, objective data, and provide that to the committee, and then the committee are all tasked with reviewing the material. If it's a book, we all have to read the book front to back. If it is a music album, we have to listen, a CD, we have to listen to it. So we have to actually review the material as a whole to the degree that we can. Then we meet and we discuss whether the material under the policy, the resources policy, if it meets the standards set by the policy. If we can come to a consensus, if we can't come to a consensus, that's fine too. Then what the access services manager does is writes a memo to the director saying, this is the recommendation of this ad hoc committee. If there were differences among committee, if it was not a consensus, I would say 3 members said this and 1 member said that, and this is some of the reasoning we gave. And then ultimately it's the director's decision to take whatever action was requested or not take whatever action was requested in the reconsideration form. Contact the patron, let the person know of the decision. And then if that individual is not satisfied, the individual can come to a board meeting and speak to the board about their feelings on the matter. And then the board can choose what the board would like to do.
Ultimately, if he makes an appeal or she makes an appeal, it goes up to the board for.
It goes up to the board, and the board might treat it as the board treats any community comments of listening, saying thank you, and moving on. The board that could also then make it a future agenda item for discussion, as boards do.
I
But
just want
yes,
to clarify also, the policy states that
And by a hearing, what do you mean?
well, we haven't really gotten to that point, but what it would be would be consider, I have to ask questions and make comments and then take a form. Opinion and action or change direction.
I noticed that the current issue before you is a periodical. How far back did you go? I'm sure it's been there.
We only carry, in print, 1 year.
When you-
And so this particular item is bi-monthly.
So it'll be 6 issues.
Plus one.
I should point out that I also reviewed the material. First one that we've had 3 years ago, I read the book as well. And periodicals, I reviewed several.
Historically, how many of those complaints have resulted in items actually being removed?
And I've been at the library for, thank you, Beth, almost 10 years. Not in my current capacity, but in a desk capacity where I would be aware of this, there have only been 2 formal.
To our knowledge. it
To our
hasn't-
knowledge,
we
yeah.
have never reviewed them.
We've never-
To our knowledge.
To our knowledge, to our knowledge. I will say, the reconsideration form, the action doesn't necessarily need to be removal. The action could be, I want this in a different section, or this shouldn't be out on the floor, but could be behind the desk. So in these scenarios, it's not necessarily what you may have seen in other areas of the country
That's why we
recently.
asked in the forum, what action do you want us to have together?
Are you also, with acquisitions, are you also over artwork, things that aren't checked out with the library
No.
purchases or not?
I am just
Just.
everything that you can check out physically and digitally, plus research databases and learning platforms.
So our subscription
Our
base.
subscription, yeah. I cannot speak for artwork on the wall. I can speak for
Well, I
artwork.
only mentioned that
in a
because we
book.
talked about the diversity that we have
We are,
funds that are earmarked, has to be spent on artwork.
yes.
And we said it should go for diverse artists. I don't know whatever happened.
It is in progress. Another staff member, our design supervisor, is overseeing that.
Thank you.
Okay, does anyone have any questions or comments on the revised resources selection policy?
I mean, I read it, I thought it was pretty comprehensive, and I think the updates that were made were very good. I think the only question that I have, and it's just out of like a cautionary question, since this is such a hot topic and it's evolving so quickly across the country in these hot spots, does this need to have any additional type of like legal review, or is there anything else that we might want to consider as like an added step, just to make sure we're not missing anything key? Or are there any key findings that we could see that maybe have happened at other libraries that could prevent something like that from happening here?
I couldn't quite make out what you're asking for.
It's a consideration or a question to everybody, like, does this need any type of additional review other than just us looking at it? Does this need like an
In other
additional
words, you
legal
look
set of
to
eyes?
other publications
Experts.
that
Correct. Like, or other case studies where.
evaluate the particular book or.
And I mean the
magazine.
policy.
Oh.
Like, does this policy need to be looked at through like a separate lens of like an additional legal review? Or is there anything else that just needs to be looked at just to make sure it's?
I can get it started and then we'll turn it over to Annabelle. I know Annabelle and her staff thinking and research and constantly participating in continuing education opportunities as an office. American Library Association, and that whole team is supported by legal experts, library experts, like all kinds of people in the profession who really get this solid, this kind of information solid, you know. So when we're looking at templates and examples from other library association, it's like with a full like historical decades and decades of research in light of like, in consideration of like kind of like the overall picture of like, censorship activities or efforts like there's a lot of like behind the scenes like industry-wide discussion and thinking about these policies and templates that we refer. I'd like to just share that. I don't know if you want to add anything.
Yeah, no, the revisions, the language, quite a bit of it was suggested by Office of Intellectual Freedom. I think one element to also consider, part of what the policy does and what part of what policies have done in the past, but even more so now, is to also make clear it's not inappropriate for someone to fill out a reconsideration form. It's not inappropriate for anyone to have a question, have a concern. In some of these conversations, I said through the years, I know one in particular, it was a youth book, it was a series. And the series, the whole series was in the kids section. Well, the last book kind of went in a different direction. And a patron pointed it out to us. I mean, it was just, hey, I noticed this kind of went place where I didn't think it would go. At the time when it's released, it kind of makes sense because you think that the kids kind of grow up with the series and they're ready for that, but
Yeah.
So we looked at it and we said, oh yes, this one in junior high, that seems a more appropriate place for it. So the conversation is such, and the policies are worded as such by the Office of Intellectual Freedom to also affirm the public's right, especially in public libraries, to have questions about the collection. That said, some of the things that we specifically added were things that based on what's been happening currently, but also just based through our everyday conversations and the changes of how we select things, how we withdraw things. There were some things where it just wasn't spelled out in a way where we thought it needed to be spelled out a little bit more. And the parental section was one of those sections where we didn't spell that out before. And I think that's a key thing to spell out because traditionally in these policies, it would just be a very broad statement of every person has a right to do whatever they want, essentially. And as a parent, I'm a parent of a young child, I'm like, no, I'm not so sure I agree. As I look through my son's phone, his things like that. But so we don't want to say that we're taking the place of a parent or guardian. For example, if someone were to check out a movie that a parent might not approve for their own child, but another family might approve for their child. So there's room for that in here, but also, again, the Office of Intellectual Freedom, the ALA, is very specific in their phrasing and very, very strong, I think, in their phrasing, especially if you look at the Bill of Rights. I mean,
Yeah.
It's pretty.
So when I read it, I was really impressed with it. I was like, I had never seen this type of thing before, and then when I read it, I felt like if I had a complaint and I read this document, it would be very clear, okay, this is how the library makes the decisions for what they choose. This is why it's important. This is my right as a patron to, so I thought it was really great. I didn't have the background context of where you were sourcing everything. So I think that was very helpful to explain. So thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Yeah.
It was fascinating to me reading the Freedom to Read. I was reading that and I'm thinking, oh, so they just wrote this because it's so reflective of what is happening right now. And then when I get to the bottom and it says 1953. Wow.
That's what I mean. It's just it's a big part of our library and our activity, is to examine this topic. It's one of the key areas that we really wrestle with, and then conversation never stops.
Any other questions or comments on the policy?
I really like the way you revised the form. I think it really works. It's nice.
Yeah, I will admit the first few times, I was probably a little bit more kid gloves with the old timey librarian stuff. And this time I was like, you know what? 2022.
No, it's good.
That's the official term, the old time.
The old librarian.
Being one of the old timey ones.
Other questions or comments? Okay, can we have a motion to approve the revised resources selection policy?
So moved.
Okay, a second.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Yes?
Yes.
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 Any opposed? Okay, that passes 7-0. Next is the approval of the revised borrowing policy.
Yes, so at this time, I would like to introduce Lynn Pearson, our patron engagement manager. I believe this might be the first time that Lynn has appeared before the board, and I just wanted to say, as a way of a number of years in leadership roles and in a variety of leadership roles as well. And we look at this policy carefully and thoroughly, and he's going to be presenting the changes that we're requesting here in the policy, and we'll all help feel kind of what the major changes were.
Sure. Thank you, Richard, for the warm introduction, and thank you, the board, for having me here tonight. I'm here, like Richard said, to discuss proposed updates to the existing borrowing policy. The policy itself addresses library cards and our borrowing rules and limits. As my memo outlines, these updates include establishing reciprocity with Chicago Public Library, the elimination of the $10 unique management services fee that is applied in certain circumstances, and the formal adoption of the three-week loan period. Reciprocal borrowing with Chicago Public Library would benefit the Skokie community by opening up access to the vast holdings of the Chicago Public Library system to our Skokie patrons. Skokie patrons will continue to have popular and unique collections available only to them, like our Hvac DVDs and our technology equipment. And our request hold system will also continue to only be available to Skokie patrons. Given these factors, as well as our robust purchasing patterns, we are confident that Skokie Public Library patrons will not be adversely affected by the expansion of borrowing to additional reciprocal patrons. The elimination of the unique management fee will remove a potential financial hardship for our community without interfering with our ability to recover long overdue items. I recommend approval of the updated borrowing policy, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions?
Again, an historic one, and thank you for this. The library used to reject the Chicago request. With that request had come up before. What's different that we're recommending it now?
Well, Chicago has updated a lot of their branches. They've also added Sunday hours. So that is a new service that they've offered within the last year. And then they've also changed their purchasing as well. So we feel like Chicago's done a lot to improve their library systems and would offer a lot to our patrons, so our patrons can go and borrow there.
So before we felt fair trade-offs. So I don't know how to say, is that what why we didn't want to do it?
Well, a certain member, previous member, was dead set against it, very vocal about it. And the concern was if we lent books to citizens of Chicago, we'd never see them.
Those people.
Those people, okay. So that was really the major obstacle to doing it.
Thank you.
And it had to have been a change because a million years ago, I had a Chicago card and I borrowed.
Is it?
As far as I know, this, our current practice of not approving reciprocity with Chicago is decades long, you know, so it's hard for me to say exactly, you know, what the arguments were made, that were made at the time, and at various points when this was brought up, but I think what Mark said is essential. So what the rationale was at the time.
I started in the mid-90s. When I started, we did not have reciprocity, so it's been a while.
And we've had requests from Skokie cardholders who work in Chicago, travel to Chicago.
And Chicago's willing to give us?
Yeah,
Okay.
no. Well, yes, once we have reciprocity,
Yeah.
it's in the rules, it's in the library.
We've had patrons who are interested in some of the history collections, you know, they did a history fair where they're teaching, and so having access is beneficial.
At this point, we're had reciprocity for years and years.
Other questions for Connie?
I'm thrilled about it.
I am too. There's so many people that, like you said, that commute to the city, they're, you know, and I just think it's great.
Something, this policy, if we were to approve it tonight, would this be something, how often would we go back and review this policy?
Great question.
We review the borrowing policy yearly, and then we could, if we decide that it is adversely affecting Skokie's ability to check out materials, or we can reconsider in a year.
Because I think it would be interesting to get some data on, you know, what would be some of, you know, even if it were the positives, right? Like, well, how many times did our Skokie library card holders end up borrowing, you know, in the Chicago system? I think that would be interesting to see, as well as vice versa, just to kind of, you know, in this kind of, you know, trial year almost, or a pilot year, to see how it all works. That would be interesting to see.
Absolutely, we've talked about that already, and we're in such a better position as an organization to make data-driven decisions, so we're totally on board with that.
Other questions or comments? Okay.
I'm sorry, in the loan period section, on page 52, where you're talking about the business card holders, and you wanted, or that we're increasing the loan limits from 30 to 50 items, and that's per day?
No, for how many they can check out at a time. So you can
Yeah,
have up
as
to.
Not per day.
Who
Not per
is
day.
checking out 30 to 50 full
Oh, no, not per day, but
Not per day.
at any
time.
given time?
Any
But
given
that
time
could
on
be,
the card.
I could get 30 today and 30 tomorrow.
No.
You have to
No,
return,
no,
only
no.
on your card could only carry a total of 30.
Okay, so in essence, it's per card
Per card.
Per card.
at a given time, okay.
Yes.
All right.
And this is used, sometimes we have reciprocal borrowers who come in, you know, mom has the card and she's got 3 kids with her, and they all want to stack of picture books, and so it adds up quite quickly.
Yeah.
And then they refill them, and then they can't borrow anymore until they.
I didn't really, you know, it didn't
not-
make
yeah,
sense to me
yeah.
that it was.
I mean, that
What?
Very
would
fast
be amazing,
readers.
50 items per day, and, you know, it would help our circulation numbers.
Doing well already.
They're-
There's
and, yeah.
Okay, any other questions or comments?
I only want to say one thing. Before the meeting, I did reach out to Richard on the data point that was in the memo about the reciprocal borrowing, about the 5.8% and the 4%. So I was curious what patrons were checking out from Chicago at those libraries. It wasn't the vast majority children's books. It was like overwhelmingly, that was the
Youth
biggest.
fiction, I believe. Oh, no, the numbers I gave you were what reciprocal borrowers currently are checking out here.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes. So it was
okay.
like, that was like the largest, so I thought that was just kind of
Yeah,
interesting to know
youth
what people were
fiction,
checking
adult
out.
fiction, adult
Yeah.
features, yeah.
Those picture books.
Well, we have 50,000 of them.
Yeah.
Items a day.
Any other comments? Questions? Okay, can I have a motion to approve the revised borrowing policy?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that passes 7-0.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
This
so
is
much.
really a big moment.
I'm excited. You can't hear my woo-hoo.
Smile through the mask.
Thank you for all your hard work with that.
Yes, thank you.
Honestly, a lot of us who've been working in the library for a long time have been waiting quite a number of years for this to happen. It's just, it makes
Okay, next is the approval of the purchase of digital real software, and that's at page 56.
And before, and kind of to tag along with that item, I'd like to just also give Annabelle a chance to share a little bit of a collection update. I think a couple months ago, the board had asked give a little bit of insight on how our collections are doing, and this won't take long, but and then Annabelle can maybe talk a little bit about the digital reel, because it's from her department.
Sure, so, and you already see some of this in our data coordinator statistics report every month, which is incredibly comprehensive. But, and you also see some of this in the annual report where there's more comprehensive kind of contextual explanation of just kind of, not explanation, but sort of observations of what we're seeing. But just to give you a quick update of what we're seeing so far. So just some items of interest. So with the pandemic, you know, we can't really do effective year-over-year comparisons over last year because we're still looking at sort of pre-pandemic versus current to see where we are. And while we're still, I think, just recouping about 50% of our gate count from before, which completely makes sense. There's still a pandemic. We're actually back up to 74% of our pre-pandemic circulation overall. And yeah, and so certain areas actually, not surprisingly, kids fiction, which includes all those picture books, also cumulatively adult nonfiction, and our display items are actually doing as well, if not better, than what they were doing pre-pandemic. Those areas were also the areas that we really fundamentally adjusted for the renovation in terms of having to face out picture books, breaking out the adult nonfiction collection, and increasing the displays and getting those beautiful tables. So that is really driving a lot of circulation, and they're doing very well. We've had a little bit of an adjustment of, in the past, adult overall performed a little bit better than youth overall, mostly driven by DVDs and Blu-ray. Now we've swapped. Youth does a little bit better than adult overall. Adult, the overall number is affected mostly, and also youth actually for that matter, by audiovisual. With streaming, youth DVDs have honestly kind of tanked because everyone, or not everyone, but a lot of people just have Disney Plus. I mean, the other day we checked and there are only 10 holds on Encanto, which is just like, it's bananas. Because it's something like that, in the past it would have 100 easily. So I think there's just been some pattern changes. But with some of the things that haven't been available on streaming, we still have really robust holds, we have still robust checkouts. The raw number for audiovisual is still huge, but those percentages have decreased. The print has just been doing really well and performing very strongly, which has just been, you know, very gratifying for all that, you know, we worked on the renovation and all that you worked on in the other renovation, all those all of life, all those bills, oh my gosh, you know. The other thing is that digital circulation, again, year over year is not helpful because pandemic we had a huge upswing in digital, But when we compare it to pre-pandemic, it's higher than it was pre-pandemic, both in overall circulation of digital, but also in overall users. So we definitely picked up more users than we had before. That stuck with it. Before the pandemic, digital was edging to about 9 to 10% of our overall circulation number, and now it's at 17% of our overall circulation. So again, we're not done with the fiscal year. I don't anticipate being able to do really tremendously useful year-over-year comparisons until the summer, because then we'll be comparing from last summer when we went back to our full hours opening, the renovation was completed, et cetera. But just a few interesting tidbits of what's been going on. So if you have any questions on that or anything else that's come up.
And then, well, there's like a year-end kind of annual report on.
Date of the
So this is
collection.
just a little teaser, since it was brought up.
How do we have, what compares the number of in-person programs that we had pre-COVID and today? How does that
Well, I don't know because in the same way I don't have anything to do with artwork on the walls. I am not the department that deals with programs, but I can tell you that particular programs, which we have not had or have had in very constrained ways, they would drive circulation. Our Friday afternoon movies were notorious. Before the movie, after the movie, it would locusts picked through the library. So that will be an interesting development as our programming becomes more robust and we have more people just physically being in the building and seeing how that translates to circulation.
Is that the plan to increase the in-person?
We're all
Definitely.
already doing that, okay, for sure.
During this, I was just gonna say, during the surge, we obviously switched a lot of things back to Zoom, but especially now that the weather's getting nicer, we can do more things in the courtyard, so we are slotting in more and more in-person events. And actually, the last couple of weeks, which would be reflected in the report you got from February, but the gate count has been the highest it's ever been since before the pandemic, the last 2 weeks. So we're definitely seeing an uptick.
We want to get to that new library.
More people are out, and even so, I mean, we have a ways to go back in pandemic level. It just amazes me how many people came in and out. But we're definitely seeing an uptick.
Plan is your plan. I don't know how to phrase my question because I'm trying to not just give you another compliment. Ask you a serious question. The question is, in terms of like that collaborative online programs that you guys are doing are really wonderful. I did that last one with that girl. I don't know what she was talking about, but I mean, I wasn't as impressed by the author as I had hoped to be, but I love that idea that we were collaborating with other libraries in the area to present someone that we might not have been able to present as an individual librarian. So I thought that was a wonderful use of the webinar format when we can combine, and I would hope we continue doing that because it's.
And we see when we do those, we try when we can. It's not always possible, but when we can, we basically for a period of time we make the electronic books, the ebooks, and the audiobooks available to anyone, so there's not a wait list. It can't always happen because of the licensing agreements with certain authors, but we try to do that with our book discussion books that are online. I know this month, I think, Nan, aren't they trying to do a little bit more? Yeah. But we definitely see an uptick of just checkouts of particular titles when we have those events.
And that Illinois Library Presents, which I think is what you're referring to, has had a very successful start. They kind of said, no more people can join. We're done for now. because it's hundreds of libraries that are participating, and they are able to bring in big names. So they definitely are still working to bring more people in, and will continue to participate.
Or I'm curious with the author events, virtual author events, do we broadcast them here at the library so people who want to watch it in community can do that? And so we can also have the benefit of them, you know, maybe looking at other library resources when
That's
they're
a good
here.
question. I
That
will
is a
check
great
into that. I don't know how the licensing and things for the Zoom works, if you can public broadcast in the auditorium, for example, but yeah, we
It'd be
will
wonderful
definitely
if
check on
it's
that.
permissible. It'd be wonderful to do that.
Even if it's just one of the smaller rooms.
Yeah, we will definitely check on that.
Right.
And pull in some of the senior clubs and.
I love that idea. We could
Yeah,
do like
it's
a
a great
little
idea.
discussion, like mini discussion after.
I like how you said senior clubs, because it goes back to what we're talking about with like when the newsletter, making services accessible to as many people as possible. And for some people that are homebound or they can't come, I mean, that's a great way to be involved in part of a larger community.
And I don't think we'll ever get completely back to we're
No,
only doing
for
in
sure.
person, because many more people have been able to come.
Yes.
Having options.
And Annabelle, while we have you here, it was so striking to me when I looked at the data, you know, that even though our gate count is so much less than it was in 2018, I had to call Richard. I said, Richard, you know, I'm reading these numbers. The gate count is, like you said, like, you know, less than half. But the borrowing levels are so much higher. So with all of your years of experience in this, what's your take on that? Like, why is all of this, I mean, I'm thrilled, and
I'd like to think that the person who planned the collections for the renovation.
I will say that.
so the right sizing, I mean,
Right. But I also
all the things you
think,
said.
I mean, truly, I think, you know, it's all, I always feel uncomfortable talking about silver linings for the pandemic but I think that in the shutdown period, everyone, or a lot of people, like, reconnected with books for their children, the importance of literacy, the being tired of screens, the need for escape. I mean, the book sales have also increased, physical book sales have also increased in this period, and I think that was just really a touchstone, and it's one of those things where when something's taken away, you realize how valuable it is.
Right.
So, you know, I feel like some of our families are still operating under the pandemic scarcity mindset of when we had curbside and when, you know, where now it's just like, you know what, I'm gonna take everything. Just in case, like, oh, like,
$50, right?
yeah,
Give me the limit.
yeah, so I think that you know, really made a difference. And then I just think our collection, you know, again, as was hoped and planned by the renovation, a big part of the renovation was to make the collections more accessible and browsable and attractive.
And they really are. They're
and
so engaging.
have them pop.
Yeah. So I personally want to say, if you remember when we took a
Yes.
walk through and you were saying we're going to right size it, and I said, oh, not the collection. Oh my gosh, our gorgeous, amazing, accessible collection. You said, Mira, trust me, it's going to be good. Our favor, and thank you. You're so right.
Okay, this discussion's been very interesting. Let's talk about purchase of digital real software. Why don't you talk about that for a bit?
Sure. So, so I will admit that the genesis of this request came from Mark Katze, because it started with our microfilm readers I believe, they actually straight up, did they all straight up break?
They were end of life.
They were end of life. And Mark, looking at options.
Our IT manager.
The IT manager for leasing, buying new microfilm readers, and quickly saw, much like other things that are surprisingly ridiculously expensive or very expensive, that these items were very expensive, and they also would require service contracts in the same way copiers do, in the same way our automated materials handler. that really would make it quite expensive. That coupled with the fact that the readers themselves, the whole process of obtaining something in microfilm now involves a staff member going to the library's basement, trying to find the reel, getting the reel, putting the reel in the reader, pressing buttons, etc. So then Mark reached out to my department because since my department is involved with our digital collections or Skokie history collections or online collections and our online indexing, we already had some experience with some of the vendors who do digitization for microfilm. And so through looking at, I think, and I'm not sure if this was in the memo, I think it's, yeah, 6 vendors and different options. BMI was by far the most cost-effective and was by far the one that, speaking to other libraries that had used BMI for their services, that they were pleased with. What this does, aside from shifting a possible expense from a machine to a digital product, is that then this microfilm, these local newspapers will be online for anyone who requests them. It will be localized to our library. So because of copyright issues, it's not like something that's just going to be on the web that anyone can get to, but through the request to staff in various ways, or for anyone here in the building, it can be accessed, and we can easily find things through keyword searching, which is also not.
Can you do a name search?
Yeah, name search. We already do some, we do hand indexing of our Skokie papers for obituaries and death notices. We will continue that because we don't, the death notices wouldn't be keyword searchable. So we'll continue doing that for local history. But this just makes the process so much simpler, so much faster. And because of the accessibility, again, someone can come in the building, we can sit them at one of our computers, or they can have their laptop, and we can point them to that and they can do their research. And then the articles can be saved as PDFs, they can be emailed. It just really will, essentially the accessibility of that microfilm collection, which would all be local history. We're not talking New York Times or anything like that. It would be Skokie.
Would you have like the Tribune or something?
No, because we have the
You
Tribune
have-
Historical Archive database. So it is hyper local to Skokie.
Can I ask, how often is it being accessed right now? Or in the recent history?
Sure, so again, I'll say this isn't my department, but it's no longer my department. So I can't give you a specific number. Actually, as someone who used to work the reference desk, and Leanne can attest to this, and in the call center, Leanne, you get calls. We get calls quite a bit about local history. We have quite a few tickets. I don't know if I can quantify it as, a few times a week, or if it's, it varies. But it is a common question, because anytime you're doing any sort of local research or genealogical research, you go to the place that has the local paper. So we get queries from across the country, and really we've gotten queries from across the world.
Also, so in a sense, it's a
I joked to Leanne, I wish I could take the board on a field trip to the basement. And have them look for, and then have them try to put, it just, the time savings and the efficiency for both staff and patrons reading this information is just,
I think anybody who's done microfilm
Yeah.
before can vouch for the fact
Yeah.
of how time consuming it.
We still have the machines, right? The microfiche readers.
the film and fiche, we have, again, I think we have one. That's
One is good, because the suggestion I have is that we have a display with a microfiche reader to announce should this program go, what you guys go, that we have one as a display to announce the change, and it would allow kids who have never even heard of such a thing to see
Yeah.
Something to
what
draw
it
the eye.
Like the
was.
typewriter. that
I
used to be-
actually love the microfiche.
My kids loved it.
Yeah, it's like when kids see a rotary phone and they don't know what to do with it.
Yep.
That's a
Old
great
people,
idea.
you know, that was like modern technology, we loved
With a
it.
visual cue to
Yeah.
introduce this,
Yeah.
And even just having the strip of film in
yeah.
And I will say, part of the issue too is then, and this isn't too much of an issue for, hasn't been for us historically, fortunately, but the degradation of film and the necessity of having a backup, we would, we wouldn't discard the film. But at a certain point, I'm not sure, and I can't speak to this fully because honestly, I don't know all the details, but my impression from Mark, our IT manager, was that these machines, the physical machines, weren't tremendously reliable. And that was part of the problem too. He was concerned that spending a lot to buy one now, it would break down sooner than we would like, which I believe is what happened with our ones that have reached their end.
And it ensures the accessibility, accessibility.
And I mean, and I will say, just as someone who oversees our digital collections, our digitized collections for what we pay for the digitized Chicago Tribune, what we pay for Sun Times, this is very affordable compared to some of those other costs. Digitization isn't cheap because it's just very manual.
Can I ask one contract line question? Page 58 under scope of work, 3A, it says 5 anonymous users are included. What does that mean?
Yeah. So that's when I said that it could be used in the library. That's basically, there could be 5 concurrent users
Okay, just
in the library.
the anonymous.
Yeah. that's
Yeah.
where
Have any
we're-
special-
You're not logging in.
Yeah.
We're not-
Yeah.
Yeah, so they are hosting, they're digitizing it, first of all, and then they are hosting the database where it lives.
Just means that our users won't have to sign in and say.
We won't have to sign in, we'll get
Okay, thank you.
we'll get 5 uses, and then again, part of the setup will be if we have someone here who wants to search it, whether we would log in for them and have it there. 5 people at a time.
Okay.
Any other questions about the contract?
I have a question just on the services. How long will it take to digitize all of this?
I believe it's over a process of 2 years, right?
No,
Oh.
I think it'll just take a few months. They offer to split the cost of it over 2 years. Of the actual digitization.
Oh, okay, I
Right.
understood
The
that.
digitization thing.
Yeah.
It would be
Right. That's better news than what I thought.
I asked Richard that same question earlier.
Yeah.
I read that memo line.
Yeah. So the 15,000 is for the actual digitization piece. And then they're offering to split that over 2 years. It was just basically, hey, we'll do you a solid, split it over 2 years. Then the hosting fee, once it's been digitized, and that's the annual 1,500.
Why did you choose not to put the year 2 annual fee in the schedule of fees?
Because Richard asked us to. But I don't remember. Again, I did not write the memo. It doesn't come out of my budget.
It's all right, we
Yeah.
won't beat you. But the estimate really is, if these turn out to be the contractual cost, 18,000.
Oh, you mean the 1,500 hosting fee for the second year?
Right,
Yeah.
because you're
Yes.
giving both years in the conversion.
Right.
So we need the second year in.
I guess the way we think of it is, the hosting fee is something that's less than 10,000 and something that from after year one, part of the original, approval, like it's just part of our IT expenses year to year, but we can, if you want to approve it as a whole, then we can do that. And
That makes sense, that, I can understand that, it's just I'm looking at a schedule of fees, so I'm questioning why it wasn't there.
sure.
But
Yeah,
that's-
it was the option, they gave us two options.
Yeah, no, that makes, I mean, it makes sense that it's not there, when you say that.
Okay. We have a motion in connection with the purchase of the digital meal software.
So moved.
Second. Shabna, second.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Mary?
Yes.
This is money we got.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
Okay, that, Shabna?
Yes.
That passes 7-0. Do you want to say something? Okay.
thank you.
Next is approval of
Just
the
mumbling.
HVAC preventative maintenance contract.
Okay. So
What the hell?
this is a renewal of of working with Hvac Mechanical Services company that we, as I stated in the menu, building services manager Andy Garcia and I have been very happy with the work that we receive from Hvac. Quite often, they respond quickly to things, cleaning things, and they're very responsible and prompt. Try them out for a year initially, and we like them. We signed a 3-year agreement with them. Time for another 3-year renewal of a preventative maintenance contract. And just as a reminder, when we did this initially and selected them, it was after a RFP process where we looked at different contractors as well. That this company. And the best thing really is that we would continue to work with the do the renovation with us as well. And to have people who have knowledge of our mechanicals. Exactly. So I recommend board approval of the 3-year agreement with Automatic Mechanical Services maintenance for HVAC systems at a total cost of $46,300.
Questions or comments?
Richard, I have a question. So when you say that with this agreement, we would continue to work with our primary and secondary mechanics as well as their contacts, is that then a separate fee, or is that included in this?
No, I didn't mean to suggest that. It just means that we would have the benefit of continuity of working with the same people.
Okay, all right, okay. Thank you.
Working as experts to that, yeah. Thanks.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, can I have a motion to approve the HVAC preventative maintenance contract?
So motion.
Yeah, a second.
Second?
Okay, we have to go individually. Mary?
Yes.
Michelle?
Yes.
Jean?
yes,
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
That passes 7. Oh, I'm sorry, Shabna.
Yes.
Passing you off. Maybe I should have your picture right there. Okay, next, the projected 2022-2023 budget. Do we have this?
I provided some information in the iPads through the drop.
And
Again, this is the second look at the budget. I mentioned the few areas that we adjusted things slightly, but no approval is necessary or action is necessary, I should say, until. And I'm happy to take questions right now.
If we keep the questions, if you have questions concerning the salary line, can you hold that for the closed session? Right. Any questions or comments on the budget?
And so we'll bring back the, another. If you have any questions in the, between now and then, also, by the way, think of something. Try to include kind of explanation of each fund. February memo.
Not approving it now,
No.
so
So-
just for questions.
Example, how we just passed the HVAC, would that show up in April
Yes,
then,
we-
in our
we-
April, in our 2022, 2023?
Yes,
Correct.
we
So we'll see
always
that
fold
reflected.
everything that we anticipate being an expense. In this case, the HVAC proposal too much, in our maintenance and buildings, maintenance of buildings and grounds. There, but we'll just have to account for that with no increase.
Okay, and it was over the
Exactly.
next 3 years. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you so
Annabelle.
much.
Thank you, Annabelle.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lynette.
Thank you.
Great job, both of you.
Yes, thank you both. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, if there are no other questions, we move on to the closed session.
Just want to do rails first.
Sure, we can do rails. Shabnam, do you have anything to add to your extensive rails report?
Absolutely not.
Thank you very much for doing this.
Always.
Okay, now, can we move on to the closed session? Okay, so I need a motion to go into closed session.
So moved.
Second?
Second,
Okay, all in favor?
aye.
Aye.
That passes 7-0. So now we're